The stage lights burned hot inside the debate hall packed with people as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped forward to the microphone. Her burgundy blazer stood out boldly against the dark backdrop, and her eyes locked like a laser on the man sitting across from her. Former Governor Christie had just wrapped up a 15-minute lecture about how rookies in politics should know their place in Washington. The smug grin on his face made it clear he thought he had landed a knockout punch on the freshman Democrat from Texas. The air in the room was thick with suspense. Every seat was filled with political insiders, reporters, and wealthy donors, their phones already recording what they assumed would be another ordinary debate moment. The moderator framed the talk as one about leadership and experience, but everyone knew this was really a clash of old guard versus new blood, insider power versus outsider fire. Christie's style was classic Christie, loud, pushy, and meant to intimidate. He leaned on his heavy presence to dominate the stage, his booming voice filling the hall as he set himself up as the seasoned adult ready to lecture the newcomer congresswoman. But what came next stunned the whole room. Christie leaned back in his chair with his arms folded, certain the 43-year-old former public defender would stumble through a shaky reply. The crowd of insiders, journalists, and activists held their breath. This was supposed to be Christie's big chance to claw back some relevance in the Republican Party after years of being sidelined. The silence stretched long, maybe only seconds, but it felt like minutes. Cameras zoomed in on both of them, Christie looking smug and expectant, Crockett calm and sharp. The hum of the air conditioner could be heard, chairs shifting softly, the faint clicking of phone cameras as everyone waited for what they assumed would be a routine moment. Instead, Crockett dropped a single line, one so sharp, so cutting, it froze Christie in place and sent shockwaves ripping through the political world. The line was so perfectly timed, so brutally on point, it blew up online within minutes while Christie sat scrambling for a comeback that never came. Before we unpack this political earthquake, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of the drama shaking up America right now. You'll want to see what's next. The energy in that hall was electric. Christie thought he was about to school a rookie. Instead, he was about to learn the hard way that underestimating Jasmine Crockett could be the biggest mistake of his political career. To see why this moment hit so hard, you need to understand exactly who these two figures are and what brought them face to face on that stage. Jasmine Crockett embodies everything the old Republican establishment fears about the new Democratic wave. At 43, she's young, razor-smart, and fearless when it comes to challenging power. She grew up in Missouri, pushed herself through law school, became a public defender, and then made history as one of the youngest black women ever elected to Congress from Texas. But what makes her truly dangerous to people like Christie is simple. She's not scared of anyone. As a public defender, she went head-to-head with prosecutors, judges, and politicians who tried to steamroll her clients. And she learned early on that in a system built to silence voices, you need to fight back with precision and force. Her rise in Texas politics was like a rocket. She didn't just win elections, she crushed them. Her debate skills became a legend, known for slicing apart opponents' arguments with surgical accuracy. Seasoned insiders whispered to newcomers, "Never underestimate the woman who can dismantle your case in under a minute." Christie, meanwhile, stands for the old Republican machine, clawing to stay relevant. The ex-New Jersey governor built his brand as the tough talker who could bulldoze opponents with his booming voice and aggressive style. For years, that formula worked for him.
Christie had once been famous for his fiery outbursts at town halls and shouting down opponents, moments that went viral and made him both a media favorite and a feared debater. But those glory days had long since faded. His presidential campaigns had crashed and burned. His ties to messy scandals had badly hurt his image. His attempts to sell himself as the reasonable Republican never stuck with a party base that had already moved past him. At 61, more and more people saw him as yesterday's man, trying desperately to relive yesterday's victories. This debate was supposed to be his big return. The theme was government experience, and Christie's team thought it was the perfect stage to remind everyone why seasoned politicians still mattered. The debate rules gave space for long answers, which was perfect for Christie's favorite trick: talk louder, talk longer, and dominate through sheer force. But what he didn't realize was that Jasmine Crockett had been preparing for this exact showdown her whole career. She had studied his moves, spotted his weaknesses, and knew exactly how to flip his own playbook back on him. The pressure couldn't have been higher. For Christie, this was his shot at proving he still counted in Republican politics. For Crockett, it was about proving the new generation of Democrats couldn't be bullied into silence by the old guard. Sitting in the crowd were major donors, party insiders, and big-name media figures, the very people who would shape the story of this night for years to come. Everyone understood they were watching a generational clash that would set the tone for modern political fights. For over an hour, the tension built. Christie was in his element, barking over panelists, raising his voice to command attention, and leaning on his physical bulk to intimidate anyone who dared challenge him. Finally, he launched into what he clearly thought was his big moment. Standing up, his voice thundered through the hall. "Let me tell you something about experience. I was governor of one of the toughest states in America. I dealt with natural disasters, budget disasters, and political scandals that would break most people. I've sat across from presidents, I've dealt with foreign leaders." The audience leaned in. Classic Christie, selling himself as the battle-tested adult while subtly cutting down everyone else on the stage. But then came his mistake. Instead of staying on his own record, he went for the attack. He turned toward Crockett and sneered, "And then we've got people like Congresswoman Crockett. Fresh faces with fresh ideas, but no clue how government really works. No history of making the hard calls that keep Americans safe and thriving." Crockett didn't flinch. Her face stayed calm, unreadable. Those who knew her well could see the small signs, lips pressed tight, hands clasped in front of her. She was loading the chamber. But Christie misread her silence as fear and kept charging ahead. "I respect the passion of young politicians," he said, puffing up, "but governing isn't about viral clips or Twitter fans. It's about experience. It's about knowing how the system works to actually get results." Some in the audience nodded, while Christie's loyalists murmured their approval. It looked like the plan was working. "When you're facing world crises, you can't be learning on the job," he hammered, now pacing like he owned the stage. "You need someone tested, proven, someone who's earned their seat after decades in public service." The moderator tried to give Crockett the floor, but Christie wouldn't let go. "I've seen too many fresh-faced politicians chewed up and spit out in Washington because they thought passion could replace preparation, or good intentions could stand in for good judgment." His tone grew louder, more mocking. "The American people deserve leaders who've already made their mistakes in smaller jobs, not in Congress, where the stakes are life and death."
Now Christie was rolling. This was vintage him, the seasoned bruiser putting the rookie in her place. Or so he thought. Christie could feel the mood in the hall tilting his way. "Don't get me wrong," he said, softening his voice into something almost fatherly. "Congresswoman Crockett seems like a nice lady. Smart, well-intentioned, sure. But being nice doesn't get you through trade negotiations. Good intentions don't stop terrorists, and brains without experience? That's just untested theory." The audience leaned in closer. Some people were nodding in agreement. Others sat waiting to see if Crockett could possibly counter what felt like a slow-motion demolition of her credibility. Christie decided it was time to throw what he believed would be the knockout punch. "I've sat in rooms where decisions affected millions of lives. I've made calls that haunted me at night. Every gray hair on my head is proof I've led through real crises." He stopped for dramatic effect, turned his eyes directly on Crockett, and declared, "That's the difference between us. I've been tested by fire. She's still playing with matches." The room buzzed instantly. Christie's backers broke into loud applause. Even some in the middle rows looked impressed by the neatness of his fiery metaphor. Christie lowered himself back into his chair, wearing the self-satisfied look of a man who thought he had just put on a debate clinic. He had questioned Crockett's qualifications, her experience, her readiness for primetime politics. In his mind, the takedown was complete. The moderator finally turned. "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" Christie leaned back with his arms crossed, a smug smile stretching across his face. He had spent 15 straight minutes painting himself as the grown-up in the room. What could a first-term congresswoman possibly say to undo that? Crockett stood slowly, walked to the microphone, and fixed her eyes directly on him. The room froze. Dead silence. What came next would play on millions of phone screens and be remembered as one of the sharpest debate comebacks in modern political memory. For 3 full seconds, Crockett said nothing.
The audience held its breath. Christie's grin widened. He thought her pause meant she was rattled. Then she spoke. "Mr. Christie, you talk about being tested by fire? The only thing I've ever seen burn you was a beach chair." The silence after that line was thunderous. No one moved, no one even breathed. The whole room was trying to process the hit they had just witnessed. And then it came. Gasps, roars of laughter, applause crashing from every corner. Christie's face flickered through confusion, shock, and then bright red embarrassment. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time in his career, Christie had no words. But Crockett wasn't finished. "You want to talk about experience? Let's talk about real experience. While you were shutting down bridges to settle political scores, I was in courtrooms defending people with no one else to fight for them. While you were lounging with billionaires at beach resorts, I was grinding 18-hour days to give working families a voice in government." The beach chair jab had landed like a lightning strike, but now she was building a full case, flipping his argument upside down piece by piece. "You say I haven't been tested? I've been tested every single day. Every courtroom I walked into as a public defender, I was tested. Every time I stood against prosecutors who tried to crush my clients, I was tested. Every time I ran for office in a state that wasn't supposed to elect someone who looks like me, I was tested." The audience hung on every word. This wasn't a timid response. It was a full-scale counterattack, delivered with surgical precision. "You want to talk about Hurricane Sandy, Mr. Christie? Let's talk about your response."
While families were struggling, you were more focused on smiling for cameras than delivering actual relief, Crockett fired back. You spent more energy planning your presidential run than making sure aid reached the people who needed it most. Christie's face began to redden, but Crockett didn't give him the chance to cut in. "And since we're on the subject of presidential runs, how did those go for you? 2 tries, 2 spectacular flops. The American people had their choice. They looked at your experience, your connections, your supposed expertise, and they picked someone else. Twice." The air in the room practically crackled now. What had started as Christie's attempt to lecture a freshman lawmaker was turning into a blow-by-blow dismantling of his entire political career. "You talked about keeping families safe, Mr. Christie? Tell that to the families caught in your bridge scandal. Tell that to the workers who lost jobs under your failed economic policies. Tell that to communities that were left behind while you were polishing your national image." Christie tried to break in, but Crockett raised her hand with such authority the room immediately went quiet. "No, sir. You had your 15 minutes. Now it's my turn." The crowd roared with laughter and cheers. Christie sagged back into his chair, completely deflated. That one line would go down as iconic, a perfect symbol of generational change, delivered with cutting precision. "You want to know the difference between us, Mr. Christie? When you were under pressure, you folded. When your approval number sank, you ran for president twice and failed both times. When your political career tanked, you turned into a commentator, lobbing stones from the sidelines." Her voice grew stronger now, filled with passion, but controlled. "I don't carry gray hair from bungling crises. I carry wisdom from making the right calls, even when they were the hard ones. Real leadership isn't about puffing up for cameras. It's about doing the right thing when no one's watching." The hall was frozen in silence, every ear locked onto her words. "You brought up international threats and terrorism? Let me tell you about the crises I face daily. Families losing homes because healthcare is unaffordable. Students drowning in debt from sky-high tuition. Workers exploited because labor protections have been shredded. These don't always make national headlines, but they are life and death for the people I serve." By now, Christie's earlier bravado had vanished. He hunched in his chair, shaking his head weakly, with nothing to say. "And since we're talking about beaches, Mr. Christie, while you posed on state beaches closed to the public during a government shutdown you caused, I was walking door to door in my district, listening to people and solving their problems." The mention of the beach sent the crowd into another wave of laughter and applause, but Crockett stayed steady, her tone serious. "You said passion can't replace preparation? You're right. That's why I spent years preparing. Law school, the courtroom, local politics, state legislature. I didn't just wake up one day and decide I deserved this seat. I earned it.
the same way you claim you did." Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping, but echoing clear through the mic. "But here's what you don't see, Mr. Christie. The American people aren't searching for someone molded by the old system. They want someone bold enough to test the system itself. They don't want leaders shaped by Washington. They want leaders who will reshape Washington." The hall erupted into sustained applause. Even some of Christie's own allies joined in. "So yes, Mr. Christie, I am different from you. I don't measure my success by how many elites I've dined with. I measure it by how many everyday people I've lifted up. I don't count my victories by how many rivals I've bullied. I count them by how many barriers I've broken." She paused, her eyes locked on Christie for the final blow. "And I don't need to tear others down to build myself up. My record speaks loudly enough.
My constituents speak for me. And funny enough, even your own record speaks against you." With that final shot, Crockett stepped back from the mic and the hall erupted in the loudest applause of the night. People leapt to their feet, cheering, some holding their phones high to capture video and photos of the moment. Christie sat stiffly across from her, his hands gripping the arms of his chair, his face flushed red as though decades of reputation had just been slapped away. The smug grin was gone, replaced by a storm of anger and confusion. What had once made him look like a Hollywood-style heavyweight now made him the punchline of the evening. Every word Crockett had thrown at him had landed like a knife to his pride. The moderator, sensing the drama spinning out of control, tried to bring the focus back. "Mr. Christie, would you like to respond to Congresswoman Crockett's points about your record and leadership style?" Christie shifted uneasily, his trademark confidence cracked wide open. For a man who had built his career on always having a quick answer, the silence was brutal. The audience leaned forward, some waiting for a comeback, others already pulling out their phones to record what was clearly turning into a history-making moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost the booming force it carried earlier. "Look," he muttered, "Congresswoman Crockett obviously came armed with talking points in opposition research. That's fine. That's politics." He stopped, searching for the swagger he once had. "But let me be clear," he added, his voice clawing back a little strength. "Personal attacks don't change the real question here. This isn't about beach chairs or approval ratings or failed campaigns. The real issue is who has the experience and the relationships needed to govern effectively in Washington." But the room stayed hushed. The energy had completely shifted. His once commanding performance now looked like a desperate attempt to patch up a sinking ship. Crockett sat calmly letting him ramble, her face showing neither gloating nor pity, just the quiet confidence of someone who had trained for this exact showdown. "I've worked with 5 presidents, both Democrat and Republican. I've managed billion-dollar budgets, dealt with disasters, negotiated with labor unions and CEOs. These are real-world experiences that matter when you're trying to make things happen in Washington." But even as the words left his mouth, the realization seemed to dawn on him. None of it was landing. The magic was gone. The intimidation that had once been his sharpest weapon had been stripped away by one perfectly timed joke and a ruthless dismantling of his entire image. And that was just the beginning. Inside the debate hall, chatter buzzed as people spilled out of their seats, but the real fireworks were happening online. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's beach chair burn were everywhere, spreading like wildfire across social media. The hashtag #BeachChairBurn was trending nationwide within the hour. Her mic drop line, paired with the image of Christie's stunned face, was being shared thousands of times a minute. Political pundits, celebrities, even everyday users jumped into the frenzy, calling it one of the most brutal political clapbacks in modern history. On Twitter, the takes came fast and merciless. Crockett just ended Christie's career with one beach chair line, "I am deceased." Another read, "Christie thought he was debating a rookie. Instead, he got a masterclass." One viral post simply said, "That moment, Crockett told him, 'You had your 15 minutes, now it's my turn.' Absolute killer instinct." The beach chair jab stung so hard because it tied back to one of Christie's most humiliating scandals, when he was photographed lounging on a state beach closed to the public during a government shutdown he himself had caused. That image had long been used as a symbol of hypocrisy and tone-deaf leadership. Crockett had resurrected it perfectly, turning a forgotten embarrassment into a political weapon. But she hadn't just tossed out a joke. She had layered it into a larger argument, making it hit twice as hard.
She had taken that beach chair jab and turned it into a launch pad, tearing apart every argument Christie had made about experience, preparation, and leadership. Political pros wasted no time calling it one of the smartest debate strategies they'd ever seen. What Crockett pulled off tonight was nothing short of brilliant, one veteran strategist said. She didn't just defend herself, she flipped the whole script. Christie walked in trying to act like the grown-up in the room and make her look like a rookie. By the end, he looked like a fossil and she looked like the future. The blowback for Christie was instant. Within hours, speaking invites on his schedule started getting quietly pulled. Big GOP donors who had been considering bankrolling his next move began backing away. Commentators who had hyped up his comeback performance just a few hours earlier were now on TV dissecting how completely he got demolished. The most damaging narrative was crystal clear. The so-called heavyweight of political brawls had been crushed by the very kind of inexperienced politician he had mocked. And if he couldn't handle a freshman congresswoman, how could anyone trust him to face foreign leaders or survive Washington's toughest fights? For Crockett, though, the moment was a rocket booster. Her social media numbers skyrocketed overnight. Democratic fundraising platforms reported massive donation surges flowing into her campaign and causes she backed. Party leaders who once called her a rising star now saw her as something bigger, maybe even a future leader of the party. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett proved why she is the future of our movement, said a senior Democratic strategist. She didn't just win a debate. She showed fearless, principled leadership that can stand toe-to-toe with anyone. Clips of the showdown became the most watched political videos of the entire year. News networks replayed the exchange on loop. Late-night comedians mined it for material for weeks. Online, the phrase "tested by fire" turned into a meme, usually paired with pictures of Christie slumped on that infamous beach chair. Meanwhile, Crockett's campaign staff worked at lightning speed. Within 24 hours, they launched a fundraising drive called Built Different, pulling in over $2 million. Her accounts gained hundreds of thousands of new followers. Event invitations flooded in from colleges, nonprofits, and companies all over the country. The cultural ripple effects went way beyond politics. Fashion magazines gushed over Crockett's sharp burgundy blazer, dubbing it a new symbol of women standing up to bullies. Stores reported spikes in sales of similar jackets. Young women on social media began posting selfies in burgundy blazers with captions like, "Ready to face my own Christie." Law schools noticed a bump in applications, many students citing Crockett's journey from public defender to Congress as their inspiration. Debate teams started using her performance as study material. Public speaking coaches pulled up her clips as the perfect example of how to shut down an aggressive opponent without losing composure. Even the corporate world took notes. Big companies that usually kept away from politics started reaching out to Crockett's office looking to book her for leadership talks and conferences. Her mix of calm under pressure and sharp counterpunching made her a model for modern leadership. But behind all the headlines and jokes, serious political observers saw a bigger story. A generational shift had just announced itself in prime time. This wasn't just Christie versus Crockett. As one historian put it, this was two versions of American politics colliding. Christie is the old playbook, white male, loud, all about domination. Crockett is the new wave, diverse, grounded, focused on delivering for everyday people. International news outlets quickly caught on, too. Analysts in Europe and Asia ran features on the exchange, framing it as a glimpse of America's changing political culture. The image of an aging establishment figure getting outclassed by a rising young leader became a symbol of generational and cultural change sweeping democracies across the globe. The debate also showed just how much political communication has changed in the age of Twitter and TikTok. Crockett's comeback wasn't just a killer moment in the room, it was engineered for virality. The beach chair jab gave people the soundbite they'd never forget, while her detailed policy points gave the exchange real weight, so it felt serious, not just entertaining. Within a week, professors were already assigning the debate in political science classes as a case study on how to dismantle an opponent. Her precision, flipping each of Christie's attacks into proof of her own strengths, became the new template for shutting down aggressive challengers. But the longer-term effects were even bigger. Overnight, Crockett had gone from rising star to national figure. The whispers started immediately. Would she run for Senate? Did she have presidential ambitions? Could she be a future party leader? Insiders who had been following her career weren't shocked by her skill, but they were blown away by how perfectly the timing and stage lined up. Jasmine has been building toward this her whole career, said one Democratic strategist. She's never been the type to wait her turn. She seizes the moment and speaks truth to power. Tonight she had the perfect stage and the perfect opponent. The contrast on stage couldn't have been clearer. Christie tried to weaponize his age and experience, mocking youth and passion as weaknesses. Crockett flipped that upside down, making his long career look like dead weight from a failed era, while her newcomer energy looked like exactly what the future demanded. What we just saw was a generational handoff, one historian explained. Christie represents everything voters are sick of: the old boys club, the backroom deals, the entitlement. Crockett represents something new: leadership based on merit, authenticity, and the courage to challenge power no matter who holds it. The demographic ripples were huge. Young voters, especially women and people of color, saw Crockett's performance as proof of their own potential. Social media blew up with posts from law students, young professionals, and aspiring candidates saying they now felt inspired to run for office themselves. One viral tweet with hundreds of thousands of likes summed it up. She didn't just destroy Christie's argument, she destroyed the whole myth that you have to wait your turn to have a voice in politics. She earned her seat, and she proved she belongs there. For Christie, the fallout looked permanent. His whole brand had been built on being the unstoppable debater who could humiliate anyone. That aura was ripped apart live on national TV and by someone he had dismissed as unqualified. Commentators were quick to point out the irony. Christie had built his career on one-liners and takedowns, and now he'd been buried by a single line that would follow him for the rest of his career. His career was already on life support, admitted one Republican strategist privately. Jasmine Crockett just pulled the plug. You don't recover from being humiliated that badly, that publicly. And the worst part? It wasn't even close. She didn't just beat him, she made him look like a fool. But beyond the personal humiliation, the debate revealed something deeper about the mood of American politics. Voters were clearly starving for leaders who stood on principle, who could stay calm under fire, who had real receipts, not just theatrics and bluster. The ripple was immediate. Young politicians, especially women and candidates of color, saw Crockett's performance as a guidebook for how to face down entrenched power. The old wait your turn model, where seniority and age automatically commanded respect, was breaking apart. A new generation was showing it would earn respect through performance, not pedigree.
Party donors and leaders took notice, too. Crockett's viral moment proved just how powerful, authentic, principled leadership could be in a digital-first era. Crockett's ability to grab attention and earn respect with substance instead of drama gave America a new blueprint for political success. And maybe the biggest lesson was what it revealed about voters themselves. People were no longer impressed by politicians who yelled the loudest or tried to bully their way through debates. They wanted leaders who could lay out clear ideas, stand firm when challenged, and actually deliver for everyday folks. In less than 5 minutes, Crockett had done all of that and made Christie's decades of experience look more like a weakness than a strength. As weeks passed, the ripple effects only grew. That fiery exchange quickly became required viewing in political science programs. The phrase beach chair politics entered the national vocabulary, shorthand for tone-deaf, hypocritical leadership. Universities across the country began weaving the debate into their teaching. Harvard's Kennedy School of Government added it to their crisis communication course. Professors everywhere used it as a masterclass in debate strategy. Even high school debate clubs dissected Crockett's technique for handling pushy opponents. The moment also kicked off bigger conversations about representation in politics. Experts pointed out that Crockett's win wasn't just one politician beating another, it was proof of a new way to define authority in American politics. She showed that credibility doesn't come automatically with age, gender, or insider titles, one political researcher explained.
She earned her power through preparation, authenticity, and results. That's a completely different model than what Christie stood for. Even the business world took notice. Corporate training programs started showing clips of Crockett's calm but devastating performance as a case study in how to handle tough negotiations or boardroom showdowns. She had become the template for keeping cool under fire while dismantling an opponent step by step. Most importantly, Jasmine Crockett had established herself as a force who could no longer be brushed aside. She had shown the world that America's new generation of leaders wasn't just ready to fight the old guard, they were ready to replace them. The message couldn't have been clearer. American politics had changed. Anyone who didn't catch on risked being the next victim of a viral takedown that could end careers overnight. Christie had learned that lesson the hard way, and the rest of the political class was paying attention, realizing they could be next if they underestimated leaders with Crockett's mix of grit, prep, and principle. The aftershocks reached into places no one expected. Memes of Crockett's beach chair burn spread way beyond political Twitter, spilling into everyday pop culture. Late-night shows spent whole segments replaying Christie's stunned face. Comedy writers milked his awkward silence for weeks. Fashion chains reported a boom in sales of burgundy blazers like the one Crockett wore. Young women started calling their sharpest business outfits their Crockett blazers, a new symbol of being confident and prepared. Publishers rushed to pitch her book deals. Documentary makers wanted to film her rise from public defender to national star. Speaking bureaus added her name to their most exclusive rosters, with universities and corporations fighting to book her. The world beyond America was watching too. Lawmakers in Europe studied her debate moves. Parties overseas began actively recruiting younger, more diverse candidates who could show the same authentic leadership Crockett had displayed. Consultants started scrambling to explain what they dubbed the Crockett effect, the ability of a well-prepared, authentic leader to completely dominate a more experienced rival by sticking to message discipline and sharp communication. Conservative think tanks rushed to study what went wrong and how Republican candidates could prepare themselves against the new wave of sharp Democratic challengers. On the other side, liberal groups pointed to the moment as proof of how to take down establishment figures effectively, without sinking into cheap personal shots. Even fundraising strategies started to shift. Donors began pouring more money into candidates who, like Crockett, showed preparation, authenticity, and the ability to shine under pressure. Suddenly, old markers like big endorsements or party connections mattered less than whether a candidate could go viral and fire up grassroots support. This wasn't just a debate. It was a live, broadcasted, social media-fueled changing of the guard. The old playbook for political battles had been torn up in front of millions, and there was no way to put it back together. And hey, if you loved watching this political earthquake unfold, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We break down the biggest moments reshaping America's political future. And if tonight showed us anything, it's that the next showdown might be even wilder, and you definitely won't want to miss it.